Danielle Monroe didn't walk into the Langmore Regent Hotel like someone looking for attention. She didn't wear heels that echoed or jewelry that shimmered. Her loafers were soft, her suit simple, and the only thing she carried was a navy, duffel slung over one shoulder. She came alone, without an assistant, without a car service, without fanfare, just a black woman in her early 50s, moving with quiet purpose. She didn't want the red carpet. She didn't want headlines. She just needed a room, her room, for one night before an early board meeting she hadn't even planned to attend in person. And yet, from the moment she stepped through the revolving glass doors of the luxury hotel that bore her name, she could feel it. Something wasn't right. Behind the front desk, a young woman in her 20s tapped her acrylic nails against the keyboard. She glanced up with a practiced smile, the kind you give to someone you're about to dismiss politely. "Checking in?" she asked. Danielle nodded. "Yes, under Monroe. Danielle." The receptionist's fingers danced across the keys for a moment, then paused. Her expression changed. I don't see a reservation under that name." Danielle stayed calm. "That's all right. There should be a suite held open under the ownership block." But the girl's tone shifted. "We're actually at full capacity tonight. You'd need a confirmed booking. Guests only." Danielle didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply glanced past the receptionist to the gold-lettered plaque on the wall behind her. Langmore Regent, a Monroe property. Her name wasn't just on a booking. It was on the building. "I am a guest," she said quietly. "And more than that, I own this hotel." There was a moment, just one, where the young woman looked stunned, like Danielle had just told her. She was Beyoncé. But then, something familiar crept across her face, doubt, coated in disbelief. Her lips curled slightly. "You own the Langmore?" she asked. Danielle nodded once, calm and steady. "I do." The girl reached for the phone. "I'm going to have to call the manager." Across the lobby, a couple in golf polos turned their heads. A man by the fireplace glanced up. Danielle felt it, the room shifting, the assumptions forming. She'd seen that look before, and she knew exactly who they thought was lying within. Moments. A thin man with a crooked tie and clipboard emerged from a side door. His badge read, "Assistant Manager. Neil something." He smiled tightly as he walked over. "Good evening. Is there an issue with your reservation?" The receptionist responded before Danielle could. "She claims to own the hotel." Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't blink. "I don't claim," she said. "I do. My name is Danielle Monroe. You'll find it on every quarterly report and executive memo. I'm here for one night. The suite should be held under the owner's block." Neil adjusted his glasses, nodding awkwardly. "Right. Just one moment, please." He turned, muttering into a walkie-talkie as he headed toward the back office. Danielle didn't follow. She didn't sigh. She didn't fidget. But something thick hung in the air now. That's when security appeared. Not with hostility, not with hands on belts, but with presence. One stood near the elevators, another posted by the coffee bar. Not to protect, just to observe. Just in case. Danielle didn't move, but inside, something burned. Not just because they didn't recognize her, but because, once again, they assumed she didn't belong. She could have pulled out ID. She could have shown emails, ownership, documents, or photos from the ribbon cutting 7 years ago. But she didn't. She stepped back, pulled out her phone, and made a single call. 26 seconds. Calm. Direct. "This is Danielle Monroe. I've been denied access to my own property. I need this resolved." Then she waited. She stood near a marble pillar while the receptionist pretended to keep typing. Danielle didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to prove herself, because this moment, it wasn't about anger. It was about clarity. And soon, everyone in that lobby would understand exactly who they had just tried to turn away. Danielle. Monroe stood by the marble column like it was built for her, calm, still, and absolutely unbothered. The receptionist kept tapping at her keyboard, pretending to find something that wasn't there. Security remained posted, not saying a word, just watching her like a presence to be managed. Guests were pretending not to listen. A man near the fireplace had lowered his book. 3 women near the window whispered behind their coffee cups. And yet, Danielle didn't look at any of them. She waited, phone still in hand. The call was done, but the consequences hadn't landed yet. Not for her, but for them. Then finally movement. The assistant manager returned, clutching a folder and trying a different tone. "Miss Monroe," he said, this time emphasizing the name. "I believe there's been a mix-up. We just want to verify—" But Danielle cut him off gently. "You can verify all you want. I'm not moving." He glanced toward security, unsure what to do next. They didn't move either. They knew something had changed, but didn't yet know what. Danielle noticed the hesitation, the shift. The room that had been against her a few minutes ago was now confused, uncertain. No one wanted to make the next mistake. That's when the elevator dinged. 2 men stepped out, not in uniforms. No, they were dressed like corporate. One in a charcoal suit, the other in a branded fleece vest. They moved with urgency, cutting through the lobby like a hot knife through tension. Danielle recognized them instantly. Brent Kessler, the regional vice president, and Carlos Reno, the district manager. Neither of them looked at the staff. They walked straight toward her. Brent reached her first. "Miss Monroe, we are so sorry," he said breathlessly. "I just got the call." Carlos followed close behind. "We're taking care of this right now." Neil started to speak, something about verifying again, but Brent shot him a look that froze him in place. The receptionist didn't speak. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Her face had gone pale. She was probably scrolling under the desk minutes earlier, Googling Danielle's name, realizing who she had just dismissed like an inconvenience. Carlos looked at his tablet. "Suite 1202 has been cleared. Your driver's being rerouted for the morning. Fruit tray and espresso will be set by 6:15. Danielle gave the smallest nod. "Thank you." But she wasn't done. She watched the people in the room, watched how their postures shifted now that they knew who she was. She observed the receptionist's hands trembling ever so slightly. She didn't need revenge. She wanted accountability. She wanted them to remember this feeling, the silence, the stillness, the sudden dread of realizing they were wrong. Carlos pulled Neil aside, his voice sharp, clipped. Brent was already on his phone, murmuring about HR protocol and service misconduct. Danielle didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. The weight of her presence was enough. She walked back to the front desk, not to gloat, not to perform, but to finish what had started. She set her phone down. "I'll take the 12th floor suite," she said. "Same setup. Please send someone to confirm it's clean." The receptionist's mouth opened, then closed. She had no words. Danielle turned to Brent. "Have I been checked in?" He nodded quickly. "Just finished. You'll have 2 key cards and an incident report before the elevator closes." Danielle looked him in the eye. "And the rest?" Brent replied. "A site-wide notification is going out. Corporate audit team's been alerted. All current staff will go through guest protocol recertification. Disciplinary actions begin tonight." She turned her gaze toward the receptionist. "You'll speak to her," Danielle said plainly. Brent cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. Privately, with HR present." Carlos looked ready to jump in, but Danielle raised one hand. "I'll speak to her, too. Not now. After I've rested." And that was it. She took the key cards and headed to the elevator. Heads turned, guests whispered. No one dared speak to her. And as the doors closed behind her, she caught one last glance at Neil. Still standing stiff behind the desk, face flushed, sweat visible. Upstairs, the suite smelled of lemon and eucalyptus. The fruit tray was there. Espresso pods were neatly stacked. A handwritten card with her initials sat waiting, clearly rushed, but present. Danielle walked the room slowly. She wasn't checking for luxury. She was checking for intent, for care, for proof that this space still remembered the standard she had built it on, because tonight wasn't about a reservation. It was about being seen. And in that moment, Danielle Monroe had made sure, without shouting, without threats, that no one in that building would ever forget who she was again. Danielle Monroe sat alone in her suite, the city lights of Savannah, flickering beyond the glass, but her thoughts weren't on the view. The espresso was warm. The fruit was perfectly arranged. The apology card, neatly signed by the kitchen manager, sat at an angle. Everything was in place, on the surface. But Danielle wasn't thinking about hospitality. She was thinking about history, about patterns, about how she was still being questioned in buildings she had paid to construct. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. Everything in motion. Let me know if you want a media statement. Danielle stared at the screen for a moment. She could have made it public. A single tweet, a quick video, and the internet would have burned with outrage. But she didn't want headlines. She didn't need the world to be angry for her. Not this time, because this wasn't about rage. It was about something far heavier, respect, and the absence of it, as she sat with her thoughts. She remembered another hotel lobby 2 decades earlier. She had just made VP, wearing a borrowed suit and discount heels that blistered her toes. In Milwaukee, the staff had followed her around the lobby until the CFO came down to collect her personally. She never forgot the look in their eyes when they realized she wasn't there to clean a room. And now, 20 years, 17 properties, and countless boardrooms later, she still had to prove it. That was the real sting. Not that she'd been denied a room, but that no part of it surprised her anymore. The next morning, Danielle descended the elevator not as a tired traveler, but as a CEO. She wore a charcoal gray suit, her blouse crisp ivory, her heels clicking, with purpose. The lobby stilled when she appeared. Staff stopped mid-conversation. The barista froze mid-pour. Brent and Carlos were already waiting, looking like they hadn't slept. She gave a slight nod and walked straight past the concierge to the executive conference room. Inside sat Assistant Manager Neil, the receptionist, her name tag now visible, Kayla Mendez, and a woman from corporate HR named Marta. No one spoke as Danielle entered. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. She simply stood at the head of the table, arms folded, and let the silence stretch. Then she asked calmly, "Would someone like to explain what happened last night from your perspective?" Kayla stared at the table. Neil cleared his throat but found no words. Eventually, Kayla mumbled, "I just didn't expect," Danielle finished for her. "Didn't expect someone like me to own the building?" Kayla nodded barely. Danielle's voice stayed steady. "Was I rude to you?" "No, ma'am." "Did I raise my voice?" "No." "Did I threaten anyone?" "No." Danielle turned to Marta. "I don't need this to be a firing squad," she said. "But I do need accountability." Marta nodded. Carlos added, "Kayla will be removed from front desk rotation until recertification is complete. Neil will be on administrative review pending interviews." Danielle nodded once, then finally sat. "How long have you worked here, Kayla?" 4 months. "And in that time, how often have you thought about who built this hotel?" Kayla hesitated. I assumed it was some corporation, a group of investors." Danielle let the weight of that answer settle in. "I've built 17 properties. From Baltimore to Phoenix, all designed with intention, luxury made accessible, service made human. I built this brand because I got tired of being treated like a shadow. So tell me, why, when I walk into my own lobby, Am I still invisible? To the people working under my name? The question wasn't sharp. It was tired, heavy. Kayla looked like she wanted to disappear. Neil sat stiff, eyes forward, jaw clenched. Carlos broke the silence again. We've drafted a company-wide memo. Mandatory inclusivity training at every Monroe property. No exceptions. Danielle looked at him. Make sure it's not just a box to check. I don't want scripts. I want understanding. I want respect when no one's watching. Brent finally spoke. We'll make it real. Danielle stood again. The meeting was over. But there was still one more conversation she needed to have, and it wouldn't happen in a boardroom. Later that morning, once the hotel rush had died down and distractions cleared, Danielle walked into the staff lounge. No announcement, no formality. Just her. Kayla sat alone, half a blueberry muffin on the table, eyes hollow. When she looked up and saw Danielle, she nearly knocked over her drink. Relax, Danielle said gently, pulling out a chair. I just want to talk. And for the first time in 24 hours, Kayla looked at her, not as a name on a plaque, not as a headline waiting to happen, but as a person. They sat for a long moment in silence, the low hum of the vending machine buzzing softly in the background. Danielle asked, Have you ever worked somewhere you felt small? Kayla nodded. Most of the time. Tell me. Kayla shrugged. Used to work at a diner out on I-80. Paper hats, no tips. Got called kid even though I was 27. Cooks yelled every shift. I felt invisible most days. Danielle leaned back. Then helped me understand how you looked me in the eye and decided I didn't belong here. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of guilt, of realization, of the slow understanding that something in Kayla's mind had shifted. I don't know, she said finally. I didn't mean to. When you walked in, I thought you were maybe lost. Or waiting on someone. You didn't look like... She stopped. Danielle asked, Didn't look like what? Kayla didn't answer. And that's when Danielle said the most important thing in the room. That's the problem. People have a picture in their head. Clean cut, probably male, probably white, definitely not me. And that picture doesn't just live in your mind. It affects choices. It affects how people are treated. I'm not here for an apology. I came here so you could see me, not just as your boss, as a person. And in that moment, Kayla did. Danielle didn't need to hear the words "I'm sorry" from Kayla. She needed the silence between them to matter. And for the first time in hours, maybe years, it did. There was no drama in that moment, no press, no public performance, just two women across a small table in a quiet break room, facing the distance between their realities, and slowly closing it. When Danielle stood, Kayla stood too. Thank you for talking to me, she said, her voice trembling. Danielle nodded once and walked out. But the change didn't stay in that room. It followed her. By mid-morning, the Langmore Regent returned to its normal rhythm. Luggage rolled across marble floors. Espresso steamed at the corner bar. Guests asked about zoo passes and trolley rides. The world moved on. But inside the management office, no one was pretending anymore. Brent stood by the window watching the valet. Carlos sat typing revisions to hiring protocol. Marta, from corporate HR, reviewed training modules with laser focus. And in the center of it all, Danielle sat with a stack of performance evaluations and flagged personnel files. She wasn't angry, she was exact. I'm not here to punish, she said aloud, reviewing a report. I'm here to prevent repetition. Carlos looked up. We're adjusting the interview process for front desk hires, bias training, empathy testing, scenario-based role play. Good, Danielle said. Put me on the rotation next quarter. Brent raised an eyebrow. You want to do what? I'll show up, she said. Random properties. Quiet, like I did here. You want to be a secret guest? Danielle shook her head. Not secret. Just anonymous, until I'm not. Carlos gave a knowing grin. That's going to make a lot of people nervous. Good, she replied. Let them sit in it. The real version of this job doesn't come with warnings. She stood, gathering the papers into a folder. Have the new training modules live by next Friday and include real guest stories. No fake scripts. I want human language, not corporate filler. I want experience to speak for itself. Brent nodded. Consider it done. Danielle stepped out of the office, back into the lobby. A new receptionist was at the desk now, posture straight, smile real. When he saw her, he didn't flinch. He nodded respectfully, like someone who understood who she was before asking. She returned the nod. The lobby felt still, even if everything moved, but she could feel it, small cracks forming in old habits. And that's where real change begins. Not in big speeches, not in flashy announcements, but in quiet corrections, repeated until they stick. Danielle headed back upstairs to pack. Her flight wasn't for hours, but she wanted to leave with clarity. When she stepped into the suite, the scent of lemon and linen greeted her. Her bag was zipped, laptop charged. Everything in order, except one thing. A folded note rested on the nightstand. Handwritten, no envelope. Miss Monroe, thank you for your grace. I'll be better. Kayla, no template, no signature block, just ink and intention. And it meant more than any formal apology the brand could have issued. Danielle folded the note and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, a car waited. The same doorman from the night before opened the door with purpose. Safe travels, Miss Monroe, he said warmly. We hope to see you again soon. She smiled. You will. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, because she had left something behind, something heavier than luggage, the weight of being underestimated, of having to explain her worth, and in its place she carried something better. Understanding, discomfort, growth, for them and maybe even for herself. But there was still one more message to send, not to the hotel, not to the staff. This one was for everyone who's ever had to walk into a room and prove they belonged there. The drive to the airport was quiet, but Danielle Monroe wasn't restless. There was no radio, no small talk, just the low hum of tires against the road and the quiet certainty of a woman who had just shifted something larger than herself. In her hand, folded neatly, was Kayla's note. She didn't need to reread it. She already knew what it said. What mattered more was what it represented. A real apology, born not from damage control but from self-awareness. Outside the car window, Savannah blurred by. Familiar buildings, faded signs, everyday life continuing like nothing had happened. But something had. Danielle hadn't just been turned away at her own hotel. She had been misjudged, doubted, and quietly erased. Again. And still, it wasn't the mistake that left a mark. It was the fact that none of it surprised her anymore. She wasn't angry, not in the way people often assumed women like her would be. She wasn't bitter. She was tired, tired of respect being conditional, tired of value being tied to appearance, tired of explaining what should be obvious. Yes, this was hers. Yes, she built it. Yes, she belonged there. And no, she didn't need to prove it. Again. Danielle had always understood that success wouldn't shield her from bias. No amount of awards, no title, no plaque on the wall would undo the images. Other people carried in their heads of who gets to lead, who gets to own, who gets to walk in without question. But that never stopped her. When the world refused to see her, she made sure she saw herself, clearly, confidently, without apology. And then she walked in anyway. She held her ground. She spoke plainly. She didn't ask for permission. She acted like the door was always hers, because it was. Inside the terminal, travelers bustled past with their coffees and carry-ons, rushing toward gates and connections. Danielle blended into the crowd, another face in transit. But inside, something had shifted. She had taken a quiet humiliation and turned it into something more enduring, a moment of reflection that forced others to see themselves in the mirror she held up. And mirrors, after all, don't lie. She hoped the lesson would stay with them, that Kayla would grow, that Neil would reflect, that Carlos and Brent would follow through. But even if they didn't, it wouldn't change her path. Danielle would keep showing up. She always had. Not for vengeance, but for something far more powerful: dignity. The kind that doesn't waver when challenged, the kind that doesn't need validation to exist. As she moved toward her gate, she thought not of the confrontation, but of the quiet power that comes from being rooted in truth. And for anyone who had ever been spoken to like they didn't matter, Danielle carried this final message, not loud, not angry, but undeniable. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are and walk like it. Every single time. Let them feel the discomfort. Let them learn. Let them wonder how they ever missed it. And when they finally see you, make sure they never forget.